Welcome to Ideas That Shape the World. I'm your host, Turdon DeBow, and I am so excited for today's episode. Not only are we filming in Microsoft, but we also have an awesome guest here today, Joe Pulizzi. Now, Joe is an author, a podcaster, a marketing speaker, and an entrepreneur. He's the Amazon best-selling author of Killing Marketing, Content Inc., and Epic Content Marketing, which was named a must-read business book by Fortune magazine. His latest book is The Will to Die, his debut novel. He founded 3 companies, not one, but 3, and that includes the Content Marketing Institute, and has launched dozens of events, including Content Marketing World. In 2014, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Content Council. His podcast series, This Old Marketing, with CMI's Robert Rose, has generated millions of downloads from people in over 150 countries. He is also the author of The Random Newsletter, delivered to thousands every 2 weeks. His foundation, The Orange Effect, delivers speech therapy and technology services to children in over 25 states. Let's welcome Joe Pulizzi.
Thanks, Turdon. I really appreciate being here. And by you reading that, I think I need to shorten my bio. I think that's the first thing I'm going to do.
I probably should have shortened it, but I feel like you have so much good things in your bio. I didn't want to leave anything out.
No, thank you. Yeah, we just updated it, as we'll talk about. There's been a lot of changes going on in my life and my career. But super glad to be with you today.
Thank you so much for being here. Now, you've been in the content marketing industry for close to 20 years, since the year 2000. When did you first fall in love with content marketing or creating content?
Yeah, now you're making me feel old. So that's why I get that Lifetime Achievement Award. When you've been in an industry long enough, I think that's what they do. It was, I don't know if it's luck or being in the right situation, but I was looking for a job. This is the late 90s. I was in Cleveland. I was working at Medical Mutual of Ohio. I was doing communications in their internal communications department, and it was fine, but I was looking for something more. I applied for an account manager position at Penton Custom Media. So Penton Media, it's changed over the years, but then it was one of the largest business-to-business media companies, and they had this really small department called Penton Custom Media. And what they did was sell content marketing services to big brands like Microsoft, like Parker Hannifin, and we would do custom magazines, newsletters, anywhere where we were trying to help them tell their story to a targeted group of people. And if you remember back in 2000, most of it was still about advertising. It was still about booths at trade shows, magazine ads, and then of course you started to get online. And I fell in love with it right away because as Google started, as social media started in the mid-2000s, I was like, people are going to have to learn how to tell their own story. They can't just rely on interrupting people in other channels. And so it's sort of, as I worked there for 7 years and started to do more custom projects, and we moved from print into blogs and into webinars and then into social media, I just fell in love with the idea that you didn't have to rely on somebody else's channel to grow your business. You could create your own audience, and that's why I ended up leaving in 2007 and just went all in with content marketing.
That's awesome. That's awesome that you told your journey in that way, because with a lot of people, when they fall in love with a new concept or a new thing, then that's what starts to generate their wills. Like, okay, so that's when they get like the best ideas, and a lot of things are birthed from that idea. So I like how you said that when you discovered that, that's what made you step out, like, hey, I figured out something that, like this concept that content will allow you to be able to own your media and tell your own story, and I'm going to go out and do something to move this forward, to let people know this, to introduce this concept to the world. And so is this where you also fell in love with your wife, Pam? Or how did you guys meet? I know you guys are working together there at Penn.
We actually met at Bowling Green. So she was a year older than me, grade over than me, and she graduated before I did at Bowling Green. And then we did the long distance relationship thing. She was a social worker, so she had a social working background. She worked in downtown Cleveland and had a very difficult, challenging job. and then decided to stay at home for a little while to have kids. But when we launched the business in 2007, actually the kids were in school. They were both, I think Joshua was in second grade and Adam was going into kindergarten. And we're like, okay, we actually needed the revenue. We didn't have a lot of money coming in, so what are we gonna do? And I said, I think this thing is gonna be big. I think I need some help getting this done. Instead of going back to social work, Pam, would you come and work? And that's when we launched the idea behind Content Marketing Institute. So I left Penton Media in 2007. It took a while to get things going. It took a couple years to really get things going. In 2009, we did the pivot to an educational organization. That's when Content Marketing Institute was formally born. And in 2010, when we saw things taking off, I basically said, I can't do this on my own. I'm a like big idea guy. I've got all kinds of ideas, but I'm not the greatest execution guy.
Right.
So, and she's all about the details. So it worked out really well. And then, of course, we ended up working with each other I still do today, but with Content Marketing Institute for 10 years. And thankfully, she decided to do that because I don't think I could have done it on my own.
So it was literally a perfect marriage then, with you having the big ideas and then her being able to be detailed enough to execute them properly.
Yeah, a lot of people ask the question, you're married and how do you work with each other all the time? And so basically when she got tired of me, she would send me away on a speaking gig. So so she was in charge of my calendar. So I knew when I was getting on her nerves, she would send me away to like Belgium or Australia to do a speaking gig. I'm like, okay, I get it. So,
yeah, 10 speaking engagements.
Yeah. So my, we started to put the team together at Content Marketing Institute to educate people on this idea of content marketing. But my job was to go out and spread the word. So I was speaking all the time. I probably we're doing 40 to 50 events a year.
Okay.
I was gone 50% of the time, and then the team, back here mostly in Cleveland, trying to execute on all these crazy ideas we had, and it ended up working. So. Wow.
So when you introduced the concept to her, like, okay, I have this idea for the Content Marketing Institute, because that wasn't her background, did you find that it took convincing? Did you have to convince her or sell her on the concept, or was she just on board right away?
Well, it probably would never happen if she wouldn't have kept prodding me, because I was talking about starting something around that from starting probably 2005, 2006, and I kept talking about it. I kept writing in my journal all the time, and I'm talking to her all the time about it. And then finally she said, so this is the end of 2006, and she said, Joe, you either need to stop talking about this so much or you need to do it. So we got together, and because financially we didn't know if we could make it work. We had to invest a lot of money in the business. And I said, okay, here's what we'll do. I promise that by the end of March 2007, I'll leave Penton and I'll start the business and I'll do this. And she was all for it. She basically didn't want to hear me complain about working for somebody else anymore and actually doing the whole thing. And actually it was the last week of March was my last day. Wow. And then on April 2nd, 2007, hung out the shingle and started what ultimately became Content Marketing Institute. So she didn't need any coaxing, probably because I was talking about it all the time. My dream was to start my own business. And finally I believed I had an idea, or at least an industry that I thought, as we were just talking about before, that was really going to take off. And nobody was talking about all these channels that companies were creating that actually needed content, and needed really good content, and needed consistent content. Right. I'm like, okay, well, we can use content marketing to grow the business, but the business is really going to be about talking about and educating people about content marketing at the same time.
Right. And I think that's really a key thing that people kind of miss too, not realizing how important it is to have a partner that really believes in what you're doing, that really supports what you're doing, because they're the closest to you. So it could have been disastrous if she didn't believe in what you were doing, but it ended up being a success because she did. And so I really love that she supported you in that way.
Well, I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs in your audience, and as an entrepreneur, I was just lucky enough to know and be aware of what I was good at and what I wasn't good at.
Right.
So, and I would do this all the time. Like, what am I really good at, and what do I want to do, and then what do I not like doing, and I'm not very good at. And I would make those lists ongoing, and I would recommend any entrepreneur do that. And for the stuff that you're not good at and you don't like to do, find somebody else to do it. So if you have that partner that can help you, or if you just have contractors that can help you get those things done, your time is really valuable. So you need to focus on, let's say, the strategy or the content creation or financials, whatever you're really good at and you're passionate about. Do those things. It'll help your business because you're passionate about it and you're good at it, and everything else just outsource.
Yes,
And
I preach this. I promised I was going to get a shirt made last year that says, "Know your strengths, hire your weaknesses."
That's exactly right.
So that I can yell that from the rooftops, because there are so many things that I'm not good at, but that as a solopreneur I had to do. And so I believe that you should have a working knowledge of everything that it takes to run your business, but delegate to the people that can do it the best, because otherwise you sit there and you dread all of these tasks that you're not even proficient in, and so it takes you way longer than it can take someone to just come in. My first and best hire was my administrator, and as soon as I hired her, I realized the stuff that was taking me a week because I didn't know how to do it, I didn't like doing it, took her like all of 15 minutes to do. And so I'm definitely a huge champion for people hiring for their weaknesses as well. So when you were starting Content Marketing Institute, how much research went into you understanding, because this was your first entrepreneurial venture, right? So for it to be your first, that was a great success. But how much research went into you ensuring, like, okay, I want to make sure that even though it is a risk, it's a calculated risk, so that I can try to avoid any kind of pitfalls or this being a mistake?
Well, I made a lot of mistakes. It's hard to say, and I'll go through some of these things, but I don't want to say, oh, I wish those things didn't happen, because I learned so much from them and from the mistakes. But what I did that was wrong, and maybe a lot of people listening would agree with this, I fell in love with my product. So the first product, so we launched in basically April 2007. First product came around in 2008. And it was a matching service, and it was a content marketing. So it was like the eHarmony for content marketing. So if there's a business out there that wanted to create content but didn't have the skills or wanted to hire somebody, we would match them up with a journalist, a content creator, an agency to do that.
Okay.
And I thought it was just the greatest idea ever. Unfortunately, financially, it didn't work very well. So 2 years of really focusing on that, I don't know if that was not a good thing, but it ended up being okay because of the fact that we created the blog. If I didn't create the blog in 2007, which was, 3 times a week, I would do a how-to post about content marketing, started to get subscribers to the blog, and created a platform and an audience. And now in hindsight, what I realize is if you build an audience first, and this is what I talk about this in my book, Content Inc., and I talk to entrepreneurs about it, don't fall in love with your product at first because you don't know yet. Build that audience, and then once you build an audience and you build loyalty and trust, and you have that audience leaning on you for expertise, you can pretty much sell whatever you want to afterwards. So as the matching product failed in 2009 and we did the pivot, we were lucky to have that audience, because then I started to actually, instead of ignoring the audience, which I was, I started to read their emails and read their comments, and they were saying, Joe, what we really want is there an event out there for content marketing we can go to? I want to meet with other content marketers. Where can I do that? My staff needs training on content marketing. Where can I do that? And we said, oh my gosh, Content Marketing Institute was the answer for that. So in May of 2010, created that only because we already had that audience. So we already had about 25,000 email subscribers, and then it just took off.
Wow.
So my learning was, don't ever fall in love with your product. If you build that audience, then you can launch in and out and test products to that audience to see what they'll buy and what they won't buy. So if anybody's starting out there, I always say, start with that first. Now the problem is I'm impatient. It takes time to do this. It takes 12, as you know, it takes 12 months, it takes 18 months to get something off the ground and build that audience. So that's where you need to have patience. But it's a little bit easier for entrepreneurs to do that than big companies who want results tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, something that you said that was key is actually not only building the audience, but listening to the audience.
Yeah.
You guys have to listen to the audience. You have to ask them exactly what it is that they want to buy from you, what they want to hear from you, and then create the content around it. It sounds
right.
like that's what you did that made you successful. And sometimes, like you said, we fall in love with our own concept. Like, okay, I love this idea, and I'm not going to let the market dictate to me, how I should run this because this is my idea, when that's exactly what we should be doing, correct?
Yeah, I mean, products come and go. I mean, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of billion-dollar companies, and when you get into those companies, what you realize is that most of their product sales are off of new products. So if you look at a company like a 3M, in the last 3 years, 50% of their revenues come from new products, even though they've got the Post-it note and even though they've got 1,000 other products and SKUs.
Right.
So you don't realize that we're always changing our product mix as we go. But the one thing that we can always have is that loyal audience. We can always make sure that you solve their problems and serve problems with some kind of content solution first. And if you can do that, then it'll open up all kinds of opportunities for you on the product side. So just don't be so rigid with your product selection. Know that those are always going to change.
Right.
The focus on what stays, that's the meaning of your brand and the meaning of your ongoing communications with that audience.
Okay. So then you would say, and I've seen you talk about it several times, that the loyal audience is where you start then.
Yep.
So then what would you say for people that are like, okay, I want to build a loyal audience, but what are the key steps that I need to build that audience that will be loyal, that will, follow the company or fall in love with the company enough to purchase what we put in front of them?
Sure. I mean, there's a couple different ways to do it, but simply, first of all, focus on who the audience is. You don't want it to come from, oh, this is what I want to talk about. That's great, but it's got to matter to the audience. So from that audience perspective, what are you really good at? Like, what's your expertise area? And then match that up with what's the consumer pain point? Like, what are they really struggling with? So if you go back to a company like a John Deere started the Furrow magazine back in the late 1800s. Well, they were targeting farmers. And what were farmers challenged with? How to operate a farm. Well, what was John Deere good at? All the new technology going on in a farm.
Right.
They matched that up, and what was birthed from that was the Furrow magazine, which is still around today. So that's your sweet spot. And then you've got to take that to the next level, and the step 2 is what we call the content tilt. How do you differentiate your message in some way so it doesn't sound like everybody else's?
Yeah.
So when you go out and you look at all the blog posts out there, look at podcasts coming from companies, what are they doing as opposed to what their competition is doing? Nothing different. You usually go to some company's blog, go to what Pepsi's doing, it's looking awfully similar to what Coke is doing from their content creation.
Right.
So you have to figure out, how do you tilt the content? How do you find that area of differentiation that you can actually break through all the clutter that's out there? Because we know there's so much clutter. So what are you going to say that's different? And then you're not even creating content yet. So this is just a little strategy. And then you figure out, what most people take from that is, oh, I got to be everywhere. I want to be on every social media channel. I got to be on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all that. And then I want to do blog posts and podcasts. It's like, no, you don't. What you really want to do is choose one. So focus on one content type. What makes the most sense for what you're trying to communicate and what you're good at, what you're passionate at. So is it audio? Is it textual? Is it imagery? Is it video? And then what's your channel? Is it going to be your blog or website? Is it going to be Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts for audio? Is it going to be YouTube or Instagram for video? And then deliver that message consistently. So let's say you're going to say, okay, makes most sense, textual and blog. I'm going to start there. Well, how most companies do it, they just, whenever they get time, they throw out a blog. That's not going to work. This is a promise to your customers, and you have to build that anticipation that you're going to send them something amazing every 2 days, every week, every Friday. So you talked about my random newsletter before. I send out that newsletter every 2 weeks, Thursday morning, 8:30. Actually, probably just sent out a little bit ago. So, and people anticipate that. I want them to feel that something as good is coming in their inbox every 2 weeks on that Thursday. Maybe you're like, okay, this podcast needs to go out at one time a month or one time a week, and just be consistent with it.
Yeah.
And you do those 3 things and build that audience. Takes the data tells you it's going to take about 9 to 12 months minimum to really build an audience if you do that.
Right.
But it'll happen. It doesn't take a lot of money, but it takes a lot of time, sweat, and perseverance to get there.
Yes, and I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs, because I speak with entrepreneurs all the time, and I believe when I just bring up content, like content creation, they just feel overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, I have to do all the things. But you're saying that if they can just commit to something that they can do, that their audience can depend on, it doesn't matter about doing all the things, it's doing one thing consistently very well.
Well, what happens is, and we talked about this before, so let's say that you have all this energy to do this content. And then you say, okay, well, I'm going to put some of that energy to a blog. I'm going to do a little mini event. I'm going to do some videos. I'm going to do Twitter and Facebook and on and on. And generally, most small businesses do about 8 or 10 things. They're doing a lot of things. Well, you take all that energy and you spread it among all those 8 to 10 things. You know what happens? You've got a lot of mediocre content or stuff that's not very good. And it happens in every company. So focus on the 1 or 2 things that you can be great at. And then if you go back and you say, well, how do most media companies become, like how did the New York Times become the New York Times or Huffington Post or BuzzFeed? They started with one thing. Started with just a newspaper, just a magazine, just a blog post, just a podcast. And then once they build a loyal audience, what we call a minimum viable audience, then they go and they diversify into other things. So we think that these companies just happened, and New York Times started yesterday and they have 150 different mini brands, and that's just always the way it's always been. No, they just used to do one thing really well. And now they do a lot of different things. That's the same exact formula today. We just feel like we have to be everywhere because we can, but it doesn't mean we should.
Right. And I believe that what you're saying can go across any industry, because you think about like someone like LeBron James. He got really, really good at basketball first, and then when he was known for the one thing, he started all these other things. And so I think that that is a great model for us. But I feel sometimes, even as creatives, I find myself as a creative like, okay, I want to do the one thing, but doing one thing for a long time is boring, so I want to do more things. And so then, like you said, you start spreading yourself out, and because you can't do everything really well. But using that creative energy for one thing would be a lot better. So you hear that. Focus on one thing.
Absolutely. That's got to be the best advice ever, because once you get really good at that, like LeBron, once you get really good at that one thing, now LeBron can pretty much do anything he wants, right? Maybe he always could. Maybe a bad example. But once you're good at that, then you can. So, you know, you talked about my novel. What am I doing writing a novel? Well, I can write a novel because I focused on being great at that one thing for a long period of time, about 10 years. And now I can do some other things and do some of the things I've always wanted to do. So don't worry, you can do different things, but become great at one thing, just like a musician would. Become great at being the best jazz guitar player you possibly could. And then you can go ahead and say, well, I want to play the drums. That's fine. Let's do this great first, and then we can do some other things after that.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, that's some great advice, especially for entrepreneurs out there. That is really, really key advice. I hope that you're listening and taking notes. So you said in one of your talks that 9 out of 10 businesses use content marketing, but only about 30% of it actually do it well or are actually effective in it. So where do you think businesses miss the mark when it comes to creating the content?
Well, we talked about a couple of these things. First thing is they're not differentiating their content at all. And it's really depressing. We've done some studies with some large companies where you'll put content in front of them that they think is theirs, and then we'll say, no, that's not yours, that's your competitors. They fall for it every time. They think it's like, oh, that sounds like us. Well, if the content you're creating sounds like somebody else, you've got a problem. So that's the one thing. The second thing is they're focusing on too many channels. So to do what we just talked about, focus on the one channel. And then the consistency is probably the biggest issue. We see so many companies do what I would call a content marketing campaign, or they'll try something for 6 months, 9 months, and then they'll try something else. And that it's the most idiotic thing ever. Why would you do that? Why would you build an audience and then say, no, I'm going to try something else? But we've been doing that in marketing and advertising forever. But we can't afford to do that anymore. So what we want to do is just consistently produce content over a long period of time. Most of these large companies that try doing let's say a magazine or a blog series or a podcast, they at max they'll go 18 months and stop. that's what are you doing?
Right.
What we really want to do is we want to focus on, we want to create it, we'll change it, based on the feedback, listening to our customers, listening to our audience, but we're going to continue on and do this forever. So when we started we started the CMI blog in 2007. I mean, that blog, so 13 years later, blog is still going. We still send it out every day, still send it out at the same time, still works, still is our best generator for email newsletters. It's not rocket science, it's just, you're doing the process. And most companies don't get there. So when you see at the end the companies that have really made it, and you see all these small businesses that are doing well, that's because they got through that void of, this is not working at 9 months, 10 months, 11 months, oh, it's picking up in 12 months, 15 months looking better, 18 months, 24 months, wow.
Right.
So, I mean, as like I said, in 2009, we didn't know we were going to make it.
Right.
But we had that blog by that time. After 2.5 years, we were really building a loyal audience. And then but if we would have waited in, let's say, 12 to 15 months and just gave up, I'd be working for somebody else right now.
Right.
So.
And I know that you've said before that patience is the name of the game when it comes to content, because it is not an overnight strategy. This is something, our content person, Brittany, she's right over there, but this is something that I talked to Brittany about even last week. I said, man, it seems like digital marketing, I've started seeing it, my mind started shifting in a different way. Like, it seems like digital marketing is not only the content and the copy for right now, because the right now copywriting gets people to take action right away, but then also the long game, the content strategy, what's going to keep people coming and being loyal over a period of time. And so having the dual strategy in the business is equally important, because at first we were just focusing on the copy that drives leads, the funnels, all of those things that you're taught in digital marketing. Like, these are the important things. These help the bottom line, but the content strategy over time also helps the bottom line, because you're building people that will consistently buy from you when you consistently give them great content.
There's a great example out there. A friend of mine, Brian Clark, created a site called copyblogger.com, and he has basically he has an SEO company behind it called Rainmaker. I love his stats, because what he found out is that 99% of the people that buy the Rainmaker platform were subscribed to his e-newsletter for at least 6 months.
Wow.
So what if you thought, when you went in and it's like, I'm not going to force a sale today. What I want to try to do is acquire an audience and keep that audience for 6 months, and then I'll sell them something. Well, that's the way Brian's been, he's growing like crazy doing that. It's just that as entrepreneurs, I get it. We want to sell today, but if you can just be patient and say, what I really want today is I want a group of people out there that really rely on us, and we can really help them every day with our information. If you do that, then you have the opportunity to sell them later, instead of landing page, get them in the funnel, which those things are all important, but I like to look at, I want to sell without selling. I don't want to, I want people to want to buy from me. It's just a heck of a lot better doing that than really saying, okay, well, how do I place this ad perfectly, or how do I place this in the squeeze page and get them to sign up for my product, rather than, I really just want them to listen to my podcast, and if they listen to my podcast for 6 months, they'll end up buying something from me.
Yes. And I think there has to be somewhat of a balance, because I hear both arguments all the time. I hear both arguments like, okay, well, why not sell to them right away if they're willing to buy? They see, marketers see like, okay, well, people convert right away, so why not sell to them right away? But then on this other end of the spectrum, it's like, but you can create a deeper level of trust by adding in just the pure content in the mix. So are you saying that it's a delicate balance of both, or are you saying to build the content first and then, start having the calls to action? I
think it's just a philosophy thing. If you're an entrepreneur, if you have an opportunity to sell somebody today, you're probably going to do it, and that's fine. But if you look at the philosophy behind content marketing, your goal is not one sale.
Right.
Your goal is to have a sales relationship with that person for a long period of time. And that's the way Amazon's done it. Like, Amazon didn't create Prime and Prime Video and all the things that they're doing so that you can buy one book or whatever you're buying off of Amazon, and that's it. They want basically to sell to you after you're dead. They want to sell to you forever.
Yeah.
And they've done a really good job at that, because they focused on the long term, and Bezos has done a really good job with that. Well, if we have that mentality, it's like, sure, if you're going to sell them something, that's fine. But my goal is not one sale. My goal is taking the relationship to a next level, but I want to sell them over and over and over again. So when we looked at Content Marketing Institute, we knew that the people that were going to buy a ticket to come to Content Marketing World were subscribed to at least 3 things that we did. They were subscribed to, let's say, the podcast, the blog, the e-newsletter, Chief Content Officer magazine, whatever the mixture was, and that was the best customer for it. And then we knew that we would really focus on them to sell them tickets because they were our best customer from an audience standpoint. And it worked really, really well. So that's where the data can come in and say, okay, these people, let's say you're looking at your email newsletter. Oh, this person opens every email newsletter and has for the last 6 to 9 months. That's probably your opportunity to sell that person because they already trust you.
Exactly. So that makes a lot of sense. And when you boil everything down, the goal is to have to increase the customer lifetime value, the lifetime value of a customer, I mean. And so when you think about the lifetime value of a customer, it is, building that relationship over time, as you say, because it takes a lot less to keep a customer than it does to keep acquiring new customers, as we know in marketing. And so if you hear that, what you should have taken away is that the lifetime value of a customer is more important than a one-time sale right away. So you have to focus on the long game, putting valuable content in front of your audience over and over again, so that then when they are ready to purchase from you, they're not just purchasing from you one time, but over a period of time, hopefully, over a long period of time, because you've created that loyal audience. Okay, so your book, Killing Marketing, is all about just kind of killing the marketing department in a company, and you have the concept of your business being a media company. Can you explain that concept a little bit more about your business being a media company?
I mean, the whole idea behind killing marketing is that we don't want to kill marketing necessarily, but we believe that most companies are doing marketing the wrong way. And a lot of what we've already had some of these discussions about. So I believe that anybody that's starting a business, so we take it from a small business perspective, anybody that starts a business today takes way more risk if they're selling traditionally. If they're saying, okay, here's the ads, here's how we're going to interrupt people, here's our product launch, here's the roadmap, instead of thinking about, okay, well, where do we want to be in 5 years and how are we going to get there? If we're thinking long term and we have an exit plan and an exit strategy behind that, we know that it's going to be a lot more effective for us to build a content brand, build somewhere online, digitally, could be in print, could be an event series where people will become the leading expert in whatever industry that you're in, instead of just saying, buy this, buy that, which is still where we're at. I mean, if you look at most marketing today, watch any television program, it's still about buy this. But what's interesting, what Procter & Gamble is doing, some of their commercials now are promoting their content brand Homemade Simple, which is, so Homemade Simple, they created as an educational site about recipes and doing things around the house and whatnot. They created it 15 years ago, started as a blog and e-newsletter. They started to build an audience, and now they're starting to use that in their television advertising and talk about, here's some tips and tricks and here's where you can go. And they're actually using their television advertising not necessarily to sell right now, but to continue to build that audience. That is
just really smart.
But that's tough to do. I mean, that's not, Procter & Gamble hasn't done that for years. And if you look at other consumer brands, they don't do that. So we're seeing more smart marketers really focus on that long-term perspective. And what I would say, it will help entrepreneurs and small businesses if you actually have an exit strategy for your business to get into that mentality. So I did a workshop presentation, it was about 6 months ago, for about 50 entrepreneurs. And I asked, okay, how many of you have an exit strategy? And nobody had an exit strategy.
Wow.
Well, how do you know? I mean, and I get it, we're all in for survival. We want to sell, we maybe know what we want this year, but where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? Are you going to live in are you going to, is this going to be your business forever? Are you going to give it to your kids? Are you going to sell it? Like, you need to answer those questions now, because then you'll make more decisions for the long term instead of just, oh, I need to make these numbers this year. I need to put food on the table.
Right.
So, and sometimes you might not think it's possible to say, oh, I want to sell my company in 7 years for $15 million or whatever. But if you do that, then you'll make decisions now to help you get there.
Right.
And I guarantee you'll work. But it will work if you go and you review that every day and you're making strategic decisions like that, then you'll market differently as well, because you're marketing for the long term. You're not saying, okay, yeah, I want to hit 500,000 in revenue this year. You're saying, okay, what do I need to do to get to 5 million in revenue in 5 years?
Right. I love that, and that's really, really great advice. That's great advice, because I don't even sometimes think about the exit strategy. I'm like, okay, for 2020, this is what I want to do, but I'm not thinking 2025.
And that's fine. 2020 is totally fine, but it's one of the I learned this a long time ago from reading books. So when I left working at Penton and started the business, I actually have them here in my notebook here. I always write down my goals, like what's my career goal, financial goal, physical goal, family goal, spiritual goal. I have them all in there, and I review them on a regular basis. And and it helped me so much, because I had I wanted to sell the company, CMI, what became CMI, even 2007, it wasn't even called CMI. I said I wanted to sell this company by 2015 for X amount of money, and I'd review that every day.
Wow.
And if I didn't have that to review on a regular basis, I would have made some decisions that would have really deterred the path.
Right.
And I was lucky that I focused on that. So if you have that every day and you're reviewing that, and whatever your goals are, let's say that you want to be able to do 10 push-ups a day or whatever. Well, you got to set the goal first. You got to review that goal, and then once you do that, then you'll do the little things during the day to get you to that goal.
Exactly. So you kind of brought that to you selling, which we're going to talk about in a minute. You selling your company for like $16 million. You brought that to you because you saw that in your head first, and you reviewed that every day, and then you worked until you actually did it. So that's awesome, and that is how you actually set a goal that you hit, is by looking at it every day, something that gets you closer to that goal. So I hope that you're taking all of these nuggets, because Joe is dropping them on you guys today. So I know that I do have a lot of entrepreneurs that watch and that are in various stages of their business, whether they're starting up or whether they're growing it and scaling. But there are some people that are like, okay, this is all well and good, but how do I build my audience without having any money? I don't have a big budget, but how do I build that audience without that budget?
Absolutely have to focus. If you focus on doing the simple things really well, you can make it happen. So it goes back to everything we've been talking about. It's not being everywhere; it's being great at one or two things.
Right.
Just like I'm assuming the people listening, you don't launch with 1,000 products. You're launching with one or two things that you do really well. You do the same thing in marketing with one or two things really well. Maybe you don't have to be on Facebook. Maybe you don't have to be on Instagram. Maybe your audience is on LinkedIn. Maybe your audience is more set up to audio versus textual.
Right.
Make those decisions as you go. So that's where I would make it very simple. And then even going back to the goals, we talk about the sales goal and the exit goal and every other goal that you want to do.
Right.
Review a lot of people don't like to do this because they think it's too much, but it's actually less than 1% of your day. 15 minutes a day. If you could get up in the morning and review those goals, and they change all the time. You don't have to, they're not rigid. You might go through a goal and say, well, maybe that's not what I want for my life, or maybe I don't want that significant other in my life, or those types of things. You can change those, but if you review them in the morning, that'll set your path for the day, because it'll make you do things like maybe you don't want to get an email first thing in the morning. Maybe you don't want to check Facebook first thing in the morning, because that's not going to help you with your goals. And then right before you go to bed, I like to review the goals again, because it'll help your subconscious during the night, because then you'll wake up with the best business ideas ever. You don't think about it, but it actually works that way. So 2 times a day, spend 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes before you go to bed, and it will change your life if you do that. It's just very, very simple, and most people don't do it.
I don't do it either. Like I'll look at my goals, like I'll have like a general thought in my head about the goals, and I'll maybe review it maybe once a week, like, okay, yeah, these are still it. Or like I hit this, or I'm closer, or I'm not closer. And so I like what you're saying, because then it really then starts shaping the way you do everything. Like you said, you start getting more ideas that lead you to actually hitting those goals more quickly than if you're looking at it like me once a week. So I really love that, and I hope you guys wrote that down.
Well, if doing that, knowing that we wanted to sell by 2015, which we sold it in 2016, so we almost made that goal, but we were on that path. I knew I wasn't going to hit the number that I wanted to hit unless we really grew both organically and through purchasing other companies.
Right.
So we actually purchased 3 small media entities as we went, which, by the way, didn't cost a lot of money, and any small business for the most part can do. So we bought an awards program, we bought an event business, and we bought basically a couple small brands that had lists associated with them. Some of these didn't cost very much money at all, but I knew, because of the goal that I wanted to sell by 2015 at a certain number, I had to accelerate in certain areas, and we had to do that. So that's sort of how it leads to some of those decisions. So back to the whole killing marketing thing.
Yeah.
A lot of small businesses don't think they can do that, but there's a lot of distressed media, a lot of small print publishers, a lot of small newspapers, a lot of small blogs out there that are struggling because they can't monetize, and they're for sale. So sometimes you might say, oh, there's this opportunity, there's this blog over in creativity that gets a really good audience, but they can't monetize, and you might say, okay, I'm going to go offer them some money and go buy them, and then you've just taken your audience from X thousands to another 30 or 40,000,
Right.
just like that, and you can accelerate your business and get to your goals quicker.
Wow, so you just introduced like it's actually a dope concept, if I may say that, but that is really a great concept. I heard you talk about in a talk it would be better for a corporation or like a bigger company to be able to buy a smaller media company and then integrate that into their business to be able to help them scale faster and hit their goals. But what you just said here is, even as entrepreneurs, if we see someone who may have a blog that they're struggling to monetize, that is in where we're trying to go, that can help us reach our goals, then we should look into purchasing. So when you say purchasing, what they're doing, is it purchasing the platform or?
Purchase the asset, whatever the asset is. So
Okay.
that could be, let's say that of somebody that has created let's just call it creativity blog.
Yeah.
And you wanted to purchase that. You're saying, okay, I'm buying creativity blog, the brand, as well as all the content, the domain name and everything, and the email list and those things.
Wow.
So it's an asset transfer. It's done all the time. It's just that it's not covered in the press a lot, where Airbnb just bought Atlas Obscura, which is a travel book.
Okay.
So why would Airbnb buy a travel book?
Right.
Well, put 2 and 2 together. It makes perfect
Yeah.
sense. They can match that up.
Exactly.
So this is happening all the time in a lot of different industries, but you don't hear about a lot of these small things. So
I've never heard that concept, but when you said it, I was like, wow, like this makes so much sense.
well, we wanted to have, and this is back in 2013, we wanted to have a technical content event, and we didn't have one. Content Marketing World wasn't that, so we wanted a West Coast technical content event, so I started listening, what are all those events available?
Right.
So I started to talk to all the people, and we found one. It was called Intelligent Content Conference. It started building a relationship with the owners of that company, and 2 years later we bought we bought the event, bought the website, the email list, everything.
Wow.
It didn't cost that much money, and it added so
So
much
wait.
to the final sales price of Content Marketing Institute. So this is those types of things, and so it takes time. You make your list.
Right.
So you would make your list of all these blogs and podcasts and things, and then you could figure out, by the way, everything's for sale.
Right.
You just have to ask. Most people that have a blog don't realize that somebody actually might want to buy it.
Right.
So
yeah, I didn't even realize that, Brittany. So we need to make a list. This is like a great concept. I'm really about to make that list
There you go.
this week. And so, like you said, with being able to purchase these assets that help us with achieving our business goals. Now you said it may not be a lot of money. So what's not a lot of money to you, Joe? Because you
All
may
right.
say like, okay, $1 million to purchase this is not a lot.
Okay, I'll be completely honest with you. I'm open book about this. The one small property was $15,000.
Okay.
So you might say that's nothing, right? The other middle property was $125,000.
Okay.
And the largest one we purchased was about $400,000.
And was that for the event?
That was for an awards program
Okay.
that we purchased.
Got
So
it.
those were the 3 different assets. One of my friends just purchased an entire magazine in a business-to-business vertical. it had 30,000 subscribers, the magazine, all the website, whatever, and it was $82,000.
Okay.
So I guess it depends on where you're at. If you're on a shoestring, you might not be able to do that. Maybe the 10,000, 15,000 one will. But most small businesses that have been around for a while that have 500,000, 600,000 in revenue, and they're getting to that point.
Yeah.
And by the way, you can defer paying them. You could say, all right, I'm gonna pay 50,000 for this thing, and I'll pay you 5,000 up front to make good for it, but then I'm gonna make payments for the next 3 years. Just like you would on a house or a car or anything else.
Yeah.
You don't have to have all the cash at once.
Right.
So anyways, there's a lot of things that you can do to be creative if you don't have the money.
Yeah.
A lot of distressed media assets out there, even like traditional magazines out there, because they're struggling to get advertising. They have such great brands and such great audiences. Sometimes you can get them for a song.
Wow.
So
yeah, I'm definitely going to be making my list, and this is like a really, really great concept that you're introducing to entrepreneurs that may, like we talked about earlier, may feel like, oh, this is overwhelming, the thought of creating all of these things myself, but let me find someone.
Buy one.
Yeah, just buy an asset.
Saves you the 18 to 24 months of building the audience.
Exactly.
It's like, I'm going to acquire the audience and start fresh. And if I started over I was going to start another business and I wanted to go into a different industry, that's the first thing I would do. I would buy the platform first, so that I don't have to spend the 2 years to build the audience.
So it's built-in authority and know, like, and trust, as soon as you start, as opposed to, like you said, it being over a period of time.
Right.
So I love that. So shifting to what you were just talking about, content marketing world. Now, I know that you said that you purchased the event company. Did you do that first before launching Content Marketing World, or did you do Content Marketing World first? I know that you said that you thought that maybe 100 people may show up to the first one, and then the first one ended up with 600 people.
So go back to 2009, and then I'll get to the Content Marketing World. So 2009, when I finally said the product is not working, what do my customers really want? What do they need?
Yeah.
And I wrote it down on a cocktail napkin. I may or may not have been drinking at the time. And I said, okay, what do we need to do to hit this ultimate goal of, that sales goal that I had? I said, okay, we're going to create the leading online destination for content marketing.
Yeah.
So that became the blog. The leading magazine in the industry, which became Chief Content Officer, and then the leading event, which became Content Marketing World. So in May of 2010, we rebranded as Content Marketing Institute and started to grow that audience online. Then in January of 11, so basically 9 months later, we launched Chief Content Officer Magazine. So that was the print version, went out quarterly.
Yeah.
And then 9 months after that, we launched Content Marketing World.
Yeah.
And so that was a fresh, organic launch. We worked with a lot of people in the city, a lot of my friends who were involved in marketing in Cleveland.
Okay.
And we reserved a room at the Renaissance Hotel that held 150 people, the George Bush Room, I think it was called. And I'm like, how are we going to get 150 people to Cleveland? I said, and by the way, Cleveland is in really good shape right now.
Right.
Back in 2011, nobody was going to come to Cleveland at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like, how do we make this happen? And we ended up getting 660 people to the event that year. And now there's 4,000 people. It's the largest business event in Cleveland, Ohio every year. And but so that was all done organically. But the reason, a lot of people say, oh, you got lucky, it just happened. Well, maybe we got lucky, but we built that audience from 2007 to 2011 and built that audience so that when we said, hey, are you interested in coming to an event, they signed up. We didn't have to promote it in a lot of other places because we already had the audience of interested people.
Right.
So, and didn't launch everything at the same time. It's just like we talked about. Launch the blog first, then we launched the magazine, then we launched the event.
Focused on the event. So that makes a lot of sense. And so that is why that did well, is because you did build the loyal audience. You did have become the authority in content marketing for people to trust you enough to say, if you have something, then I'm definitely going to be there. And so it grew, like you said, from 600 people the first year all the way to 4,000 plus people that attend or that are attending now. And I know that you sold to UBM
UBM.
sold your company, but before then, how did you ensure that every year it was going to continue to grow the way that you wanted it to grow?
Grow the audience.
Okay. So you knew that if you grew the audience, then there would be no problem.
There is a direct correlation between the audience that we have that engages in our content and what we're able to sell.
Okay.
A lot of people don't think about it that way, but
Yeah.
we knew. So if you look at, okay, we had 30,000 subscribers in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So at 30,000, we had 600 people there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had 950 the next year because we had 45 or 50,000 subscribers, and then we had 1,300 or 1,400 the next year because and it just on and on and on. Now they've got 225,000 and email addresses in their audience, and they've got 4,000 people coming to the event.
Wow.
So if you think about it that way, it makes it a lot easier because you've got a lot of new people coming in. You've got the loyal people, and you're working on them a little bit differently from a content standpoint that have been around for a while. So I mean, those are and then we diversified a lot. Now we have the Tuesday Twitter chats that we do.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the podcast, This Old Marketing, that we're on.
Right.
A lot of different things to communicate because some people are at different places in their journey, educational journey. So the blog's a really good place to go for basic.
Mm-hmm.
If you're more advanced, it would be more the podcast or the webinars or something like that.
Right, to continue to, the content drives the audience and continues to build the audience. So that makes a lot of sense. So in June 2016, you sold your company, Content Marketing Institute, for $17.6 million. And how did that, I know that you said that you had an exit strategy in place. How did the whole opportunity come about to where it actually took place?
So had the goal, had the exit.
Yeah.
And over, let's say, the previous 5 years, so 2011 to 2016, I was making a list of people that would purchase us. Isn't that such? You have to have an ego, I guess, to do this. So I was like, okay, well, that company would, and that company would, and that company would. And as soon as I wrote that,
did you just know that instinctively? Or?
Well, yeah, I said, okay, well, UBM, they're in that industry. They do events. HubSpot. There's a couple other companies I would put down, and I would say, okay, these people would be interested in our business model. Mm-hmm. Most of them were media companies. Some of them were product, like our sponsors would be some of the other ones. So when I made that list, I said, okay, well, what do I need to do so that they don't ignore me when I'm ready? So I went to events that they were at. Mm-hmm. I would go and find them and introduce myself, and so by 2015, when we actually went out, we did a limited request for information or limited memorandum, where I only went out to a small number of companies that I built these relationships with and said, hey, we're ready to sell. I didn't send it out to everyone, just to those people. I said, all right, do you want the memorandum? Do you want more information? And they would say yes. So then we would send them the information, and I worked with a financial advisor on getting this done. We put a packet together, the whole thing, charts on the growth, and basically was a business plan to send to them. And then we said, hey, if you're interested, let us know by whatever date. They would let us know, and then we had a meeting. We would get initial offers, go through another meeting, and then go through spreadsheet hell with certain companies to make sure that it lined up for them. And 6 months later, that was it. It was a really tough process. It was not a simple process, especially because our financials work differently than UBM's financials. But they were great to work with, and we got it done. So we started the process in November of 15 and actually sold in June of 16. So that's how long.
Did it seem like a long 6 months because of everything that went into it, or was it like, okay, it was a difficult 6 months, but it went quickly?
It was excruciating.
Okay.
I don't want to say it was not easy. I mean, my wife and I, we were like, when is this going to end? Because usually when we thought we were at a point where we were done, they would ask for another spreadsheet, something else. We had to talk to another lawyer, another financial person, and they're a lot bigger company. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. So we're dealing with something different than a small business.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of patience to go through, but that was the goal. That was what we were trying to get to. And the hardest part was actually telling the staff. Now the great news is that almost everyone is still with the company 3 years later. Which is awesome. Really the only ones that aren't with the company started their own business, which is wonderful. So we're really happy with how it turned out.
That's awesome. That's awesome that you were able to set that goal, to hit that goal. Of course, we never know what goes into the goals that we set until we get there, you were able to do it. And so that is what Ideas to Shape the World is about, is having having an idea, a concept, and acting on it and getting the results that you set out to get. And so fast forward to January 1st of 2018, you stepped down as the founder of Content Marketing Institute, and you went on a sabbatical, 30 days with no technology, which
That's
I
right.
commend you for that. And then a year-long sabbatical with
Yeah.
nothing content marketing
No work related,
no
yeah,
work
nothing.
related things.
Nothing.
So why was this important for you to do?
So in November of 17, so I was planning I wrote my love letter to the CMI community, and I said I'm leaving and I'm going to take a break for a while. But then everyone was asking, Joe, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I didn't know how to answer. I started to really. It got old after a while. I was like, oh, I'm going to buy some sheep and tend to them. I mean, like I was coming up with all kinds of weird things to tell them.
Right.
And I was talking to my wife about it, and she said, why don't you just do nothing? Like, what are you doing this for? You're doing it because you want to spend more time with the family. And my two boys are junior and senior now, so they were still in high school at that point.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, I want to spend time with them. I want to be available. How do I make this transition? And I thought the best way to do it would be just go cold turkey, no Twitter, no. And I was very active on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, the blog, everything. And I said, just nothing. So in December, I told my audiences, I put it in all my profiles, I am offline for the month of January. And January 1st to probably January 14th, I did get itchy. I mean, if you're ready, you get up in the morning and you look at it and then you go to not. So I took all of the icons off, and I took everything off my phone, and I only used the phone for messaging with my kids.
Wow.
That's all
So
I
you
used.
were, like,
No
really
email,
dedicated.
no email, no anything. And I got to tell you, if you can ever do it even for a weekend, it'll change your world. Because my wife can answer better than I can, but she will tell you that I noticed a lot more. I wasn't as distracted. When I was
Right.
with the kids and with the family, I was with the family. I wasn't thinking about where I got to be or what event I got to speak
Right.
at or anything like that. So I think it really helped our relationship as a family. And then for the next 11 months, we just had a year of fun.
That's
Every
awesome.
weekend we were doing something. We were going places. My kids
Right.
love roller coasters. So we were going to parks in the summer, doing whatever, and just gave time to say, I don't know if you call it a victory lap or whatever, but it was more for the kids. Didn't see me a lot for 7 years. I was on the road all the time, and I missed a lot growing up. And I said, okay, I'm not missing it anymore.
Right.
So that was a very special year. So now in 19, I'm trying to keep a lot of that. I'm not big on social media. I do 15 minutes here and there.
Right.
Say my thing, check what I need to check, and then I'm off. And I don't want to be on all the time. And if I'm with the kids, I want to be with the kids and
Right,
doing
the
stuff.
quality
And
time.
it's really, really important.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah.
Something that I live by is that in order for your business to work, you have to be, in alignment with some type of, spiritual or self-care practices,
Yeah.
and then you focus on, profit and being able to, amass revenue into your business. But then you come to the place of freedom where, it's not like, oh, I gotta, I'm surviving and, making all these things work. It's like, no, like I can actually have the freedom to do what I want to do. And so it sounds like that's what you did
Yeah.
last year. And I think that that's amazing because you were able to not only, connect again with your family. Like you said, you were on the road for 7 years, but you were able to go do whatever it is that
Yep.
you wanted to do.
And I think, so when I'll tell people, oh, you got to do a sabbatical, they're like, let's be realistic. They probably don't have a year and they don't have 30 days. People don't have the time, and I totally get that.
Yeah.
So what I recommend is take a day, take a weekend, because when I see a lot of my friends, they're checking work email on a Saturday night, or they're on, do a weekend where you're not distracted.
Right.
And it'll change your world. You just see life differently. You don't realize how much you are tethered to that device. And I see it happen all the time. Like we'll go out to dinner with some friends, and everybody puts their phone up next to them, and I'm like, get that phone off the table.
Right.
Like we're here, we're social media right here, right at the dinner table.
Yeah,
here.
and that's so funny too, because I went out to eat with a group of people as well, and literally everyone, I looked around, I was looking at this restaurant, and literally everyone was like this on their phone. I'm like, Man, that's not quality time.
It's like your friends on Facebook. I'm like, do I not entertain you?
Right.
What do I have to do for you to pay
Right,
attention to me?
right. So that's what I'm doing next week for my birthday. Actually, we got some cabins to go to, and I was like, okay, I'm getting away for a couple of days.
Great.
But then I read when they sent me I guess they send this after you book it. They were like, we have limited internet access. I was like, oh, they would send this after. But I'm like, you know what?
That's
this
okay.
is a good thing. I'm going to not do, social media. They were like, we don't even have like cable on the TV, so you bring a DVD. I'm like, I haven't even seen a DVD in forever, but I'm gonna go ahead and give it a go.
That.
So yeah, I'm gonna do it for my birthday next week.
That's
a
great idea.
Take those couple of days and get off the grid.
I like it.
Let's talk about the orange effect. So in an interview, I saw that your son Joshua was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2 years old.
That's correct.
And so I know that had to be a tough moment for your family. Can you explain that moment? What was going through your mind when you found out his diagnosis?
Well, I mean, so he's 2 years old, went out to the clinic. He has no vocabulary at all. He's way behind on everything.
Right.
We probably should have taken him sooner, but we were in denial. We didn't know. First-time parents, you don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, he would never make eye contact with you, so he's sort of looking past you or through you. And the doctor said that Joshua would never go to regular school, would always have to, he would always be substantially different, and didn't say it in a good way, kind of different, which different is always usually good, but in this way, it's like, okay, he's always going to have struggle.
Yeah.
And we were like, what do we do? My wife and I started, mostly my wife, but started to do research on, what can we do, whatever. We got Joshua involved in aggressive speech and play therapy, starting right from that point. So then when he was about 3, he actually started to have a couple words, started to talk. Yeah. We held him back 1 year in kindergarten, went to regular kindergarten with a tutor at 6, still had the tutor at 8, and by 9 years old, he was fine.
Wow.
And if you meet him today, now he was high functioning autism, so if you meet him today, you'd think he's just a quirky teenager.
Yeah.
He's really into computers, and he wants to go into computer science in college, so everything's going great. But what we realized along the way is we were able to afford the speech therapy, and what we found out is a lot of families aren't.
Yeah.
So 2007, we started a golf outing. It was the Golf for Autism. And we started to raise money, and in 2014 we formalized it, created the Orange Effect Foundation, 501c3. So now I think we have a little more than 200 kids in 30 states that we provide grants to, so that they can pay for speech therapy, their families can pay for speech therapy. We're all about, again, consistent speech therapy. What we found is that if you consistently work on this every week, you can't have any breaks in it. That's when you'll see breakthroughs. That's when the kids will start to communicate. And they just need that access. But if you're a family and you don't have money and you have to choose between speech therapy or putting food on the table, you're going to choose food on the table. You're going to choose survival. So a lot of times these kids don't have the opportunity to get the speech therapy. So that's what I don't want to say we're last resort, but we're really trying to help them out. And it's worked really well, and that's one of our passions. And my son's really involved in it as well. And so we're a fundraising organization. So we try to get any of those funds, and we'll give it directly to the hospital or the speech therapist, so that they can cover the child. And we do all the vetting of, do they need the money, and what's the situation, and all that kind of stuff. And our board does a great job with that.
That's awesome. I've heard a lot of people say that some of your purpose is birthed out of, painful situations or things that has happened. So how were you able to, as you were going through the process, I know that you were able, like you said, to afford the speech therapy, but how were you able to identify the need of, there needing to be, speech therapy and technology available for other children with special needs?
Just by being involved in the communities and learning what Joshua went through with his, and he was having speech therapy and play therapy every day.
Yeah.
And we thought that was necessary. And he was a trooper, and he went through it. I know he hated it sometimes, that having to go through this again. But he was a kid where if you put a bunch of kids, you put 20 kids in a room, Josh was in the corner by himself.
Yeah.
And he's not going to want to talk to any. He has no interest in anybody else. It's different today, but that's the way that it was. And we started to talk to more families and started to hear how insurance didn't cover a lot of this stuff, and how it's really it's costly in a lot of cases. Sometimes it's up to $100 an hour, sometimes more. In California, it's a lot more to pay for some of these services. And so organizations like Autism Speaks and a lot of other, they do great job on research and awareness. But what do you do when the kid has got autism or she's got autism and needs the help now, and there's not a lot of organizations helping to do that. So we're just trying to fill a hole.
Yes, and what you're doing is amazing, and to be able to help, children not just here but all over the United States is a blessing, I know, to a lot of different families. And so how would people be able to support this cause to help you?
We will take any and all, even if it's a $5 donation. We will take it. You can go to the orangeeffect.org, or we have a campaign right now. It's our 60 Kids campaign. So we're trying to get funding for 60 kids for the next year for speech therapy services. So if you go to bit.ly.com/OEF60, so bit.ly.com/OEF60, you'll go right to the page. We've got the countdown going, and we're trying to raise the funds for the 60 kids, and we're hoping to do that in the next 6 months. But anything, so $50 covers an hour, $2,500 covers one kid. So that's my job is just to get out there and as much awareness as we can get around that because a lot of people don't know.
And so now that you've done all of these, I can't think of any other word. It's a big word, but dope things.
I like it. Don't take it.
You've done you've caused these waves in content marketing. You've written 5 books. I know that you had a goal of 2 books per year, and it seems like you've hit that goal.
Yep.
You sold a successful company. You received even a Lifetime Achievement Award, at a young or at a early stage in what you're doing, and the list goes on. So I want you to explain to everyone what is next for Joe Pulizzi.
So I promised until the kids were out of high school that I'm nothing formal. I'm not going to go back and do anything. I'm just going to focus on things that are fun. But I always wanted my wife to read one of my books. So I've written 5 business books, and my wife has only read the acknowledgments page of all of them. She never read any of them. I know, why would she want to read a nobody wants to read a content marketing book, but she didn't want it. And so I'm like, okay, what do I have to do for her to read one of my books? And she loves mysteries and thrillers. So in January of 2018, right about my sabbatical time when the kids were in school, I was starting my book, and I finished it in January of 2019, and on December 4th, The Will to Die comes out. So it's a mystery thriller about death in a small town, and it's hopefully, if you like conspiracy theories and things like that, and it stars a marketing guy who inherits a funeral home. So I grew up in a funeral home family, and of course I know the marketing background. So it's the first book she read it, she liked it. That's the first book she read, so I feel like I've accomplished something. And she actually read one of my books, and I'm giving it away for free. So I hired a professional voice actor to read the whole thing. It's done. I'm uploading it now. So by the time people listen to this, it'll be available. And you go to thewilltodie.com, and you can download it on your favorite podcast player, the whole audio book. And I want it to be a series. I really enjoyed it. So hopefully it'll be a part 2 coming out pretty shortly.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Branching out, and again, just taking an idea and actually doing something with it by creating this novel. And so this is fun because it allows you to be able to stretch your imagination and be creative, whereas the marketing books is more factual and you're teaching something. With this, you're able to be a little bit more free with your creativity. And so thewilltodie.com, right? I already subscribed. You can go to the podcast, you can subscribe, and you'll get the whole book for free.
That's right.
And I love this. This is a great way to get your wife to read something that you've written. And so I just love that. In and of itself.
Whatever it takes. Yeah.
But I'll be definitely checking it out when it comes out. I haven't read a novel in so long, so I'm interested to see.
Well, nobody, we were talking before, everybody launches books the same way. If you're the traditional publisher, you've got your way. You launch with the print and the ebook and the audiobook at the same time. And if you're a self-publisher, you're launching an ebook on Amazon. Nobody's doing it to build an audience. So my goal is to build an audience around the novel, around the fiction concept. And so I said, well, what's the best way to build an audience with this? Give it away for free.
Right.
And then I've got the email sign up for more information. So we'll see. I'll touch base with you in 3 or 4 months, and I'll let you know if it worked or not.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't believe that nobody's done anything differently in book marketing for a long time, and basically they just give it up to Amazon. And I'm like, well, there's got to be another way to do it. So we're trying to do it without Amazon, and see what happens. So.
Well, that is an idea that we'll see what happens.
We'll see. You never know.
You never know.
Never know.
But the thing is that you have the courage every time with each of these ideas to actually implement them, to jump out there and to create something different. And so I commend you on that.
Thank you.
This is what this is all about. I believe we're created to create. So this is great. So for any entrepreneurs out there, as we wrap up, that want to learn more about you, what you're doing, what you have coming up, or maybe subscribe because of all the great content that you have out there. Can you tell them where to find you?
So if you go to joepulizzi.com, Pulizzi.com, you can get all my books on there. If you're a small business, Content Inc. is probably the best book to go to Killing Marketings for larger companies. And then I send an e-newsletter every 2 weeks called the Random Newsletter, and you can sign up at the joepulizzi.com site.
We are going to wrap this up. I want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know the last time that we connected and I wanted you on the podcast was right before your sabbatical. So I'm glad I was able to connect with you and you were able to come on here and share such great and valuable content and information with the audience. So thank you so much for being a part today. And for everyone that's out there listening and watching, thank you, first of all. And if you want something that really helps you to move the needle in your business, digital marketing wise, because that's what we help entrepreneurs and business owners with, being able to move the needle in their business with digital marketing techniques and strategies. So you can go to creativityhelps.com/training, and it'll be a free training there to help you to further what you're doing with your marketing efforts. And so I want to thank you again for tuning in, for watching. I want to thank Joe for being here, and until next time, peace.